Oh, I should click the got it thing. So I should just start
Yes, sir.
and be close enough to the top of the hour. Well, hi, thanks for inviting me. I am here and ready to talk about this book that I had that came out not that long ago. The history of the book, it's all through Saber that I got involved with this. I probably talk about this in the beginning of the book, but I don't recall precisely what I said there. Some of you may have been at games at one ballpark or another. I think that's a safe bet. I go to a lot of games at Fenway Park. I think I went to something a little over 70 games at Fenway Park this last year. Had nothing else to do given the pandemic. And so I found, and I'm retired, so that helps. The gates open about 90 minutes before the time of the game. About an hour before the game, you might notice 3 or 4 men walk through the park, even walk through the crowd sometimes, because they umpires tend to arrive about an hour before the game, not as long as ahead of time as one might think. And so they often walk right through the crowd and nobody knows who they are. It's a rare fan that will recognize an umpire. Joe West just retired this last year. He was probably the most recognizable among the current crop of umpires, but they come in, they don't wear their uniforms when they walk into the ballpark. They come and just wear street clothes and they walk through the crowd and almost nobody realizes who they are and wouldn't recognize them. If somebody said, hey, those are the umpires over there, people say, yeah, okay. And might glance at them out of a little bit of curiosity, but probably wouldn't even recognize one of them. Very few of them, even by dedicated fans, very few major league umpires are recognized. They're there for one reason, or one primary reason, and that's what I named the book after. They're there to work a perfect game. Now, I called the book, you've all seen it, I hope by now, but working a perfect game with those words, perfect game, in quotation marks. Tony Dazzo told me about that. He was just talking along. He said, well, we just like to work a perfect game. And I said, well, sure, everybody'd love to work a perfect game or no hit or whatever. And he said, no, you don't understand what I mean. And then he explained a little bit that it was essentially a game at which the umpires make all the right calls. There's no controversies. And they feel good about the calls they've made too. One of the things that impressed me in some of the very first conversations I had with umpires was how much they care. And I believe I don't think they were just saying this to be, say the routine stuff that you might expect. Several umpires told me that they lost sleep over making the right call, but being in a less than optimal position to make it. So say it's a bang, bang play at first base and the umpire calls the runner safe or out. No argument maybe, or maybe there's a big argument, doesn't really matter. But the umpire realized afterwards, let's say there is a replay and the umpire is upheld. So, okay, he feels good. It's, I made the right call, but being self-critical, and they all get tape of film afterwards to review. They're all graded and marked at every single game. They have someone giving them a grade, usually in the high 90s, but they, I don't suppose it's ever been 100. I should ask them, never asked anybody if they ever got 100, but they might be 2 feet up the line, 5 feet up the line more than they should have been, in their opinion, to get the play. And they'll beat themselves up over that sometimes. Of course, if you make the wrong call and it's held up, that you feel worse. I guess I was not at the Saber convention in 2019. I went to London to see the Red Sox play the Yankees. But I understand that I think it was Vic Carapazza made 4 calls, every one of which was overruled during the course of the game that the Saber members attended during that convention. And that's astonishing.
I remember that. Yes, that got a lot of conversation among the Saber members at that game.
You would think so. I mean, just twice would be remarkable. But I mean, he's a longtime veteran umpire. His father-in-law was an umpire as well, and he just Richie Garcia. He just goes back for a long time. He just had a really bad day for whatever reason. So they're largely anonymous. Most of them want to keep it that way. Almost every one of them would way prefer to keep it that way. They have lives that are very different from the players or other figures associated with baseball who are under public scrutiny all the time. Usually if there's attention paid to an umpire, it's because he screwed up. And, you don't have a lot of discussion, and if umpire makes a routine call at third base or something like that, well, okay, that's the call. And that's the way they want it. They don't really want to be in the news. And one or two of them have written books. Well, more than a few of them have written books, but for the most part, they really don't want to be in the limelight in any way. I first got involved in this because of Saber, going back to the 2002 convention in Boston. That was the second convention that I ever went to. I went to the one it was in Milwaukee in 2001 because we were going to host the convention in 2002, and I'd never been to one before. So I wanted to go to Milwaukee to see what it was like. And it was great. And the only one I've missed since that time was the one where I went to London in 2019. I also missed last year's and the year before, but that's because we didn't have them. Hope to see some of you in Baltimore this year if we can all get down there. But we put on a panel at the 2002 convention. Dave Anderson, David Vincent, both of whom had extensive experience with umpires and rules. I hosted the panel. We had a former Major League umpire, Bob Long, join us on the panel, and umpire observer, Kevin O'Connor, who's from around the Worcester, Massachusetts area. Kevin was on his way to become a Major League umpire, but it takes typically 8 years or so of apprenticeship, working your way up through the minor leagues. It's harder than a player very few players are going to spend 8 years in the minor leagues and then finally make the major leagues. You might spend 3 or 4 years, or in the olden days, maybe a little longer, but umpires typically spend about 8 years or so. Kevin just couldn't hack it any longer. He had other responsibilities, had a young family, and he wasn't really sure, he didn't get bad grades, but it was just taking too long. So he became a real estate agent. He's pretty successful at that, but he also works as an umpire observer. He's at many of the games at Fenway Park. He's at many of the games at Pawtucket, or in this last year at Worcester, where the Red Sox have their AAA club. He loves Worcester because it's only a few minutes drive from his house, as opposed to the hour it takes him to get into Fenway Park. I often sit 2 or 3 seats away from him. The Red Sox accord me press credentials. That's why one of the reasons I was able to go to 70-some games last year. We often talk about, just life in general, or something that I might have heard about one of the umpires. I check with him and so forth. And until this last 2 years, when I would go down and say hi to the umpires as they're walking into the park, but I didn't ever sit down and talk to them because of COVID restrictions. It's been disappointing because I enjoyed spending time with them over several years, building up to 2 different books that I've done now. I didn't follow up on the 2002 convention for some years, but in 2011, December 2011, Saber published the first book in what's now called the Saber Digital Library. It was a book on scouts that I worked on with Jim Sandoval. And he got me interested in that book. And we tell the story of a whole bunch of other professionals who work in the game of baseball, even further behind the scenes than umpires, but also largely anonymous compared to the players that get all the star billing. Those are the scouts. And we did a book that became the first book in the digital library, which just last month celebrated the 10th anniversary of these Saber books. And I've done a lot of them. You may recognize my name from that. One of the ones that I did that I was really happiest with was this one here, the Saber book of Umpires and Umpiring. I worked on this with Larry Gerlach, who was essentially the guru of umpires in Saber. He was my mentor and wrote, I was happy that he helped me out with working a perfect game too. And he read everything that I wrote, and I wrote an introduction to the book too. But this book is 470 some pages. you can download it for free. Like, hopefully you all know that, but every one of our Saber books can be downloaded for free, or if you don't already have a copy, you can get it there. But one of the things that we did, we tried to look at umpiring from every perspective that we could. Have an article in there on Janet Moreno, who is the first woman umpire in a major league. She's in Cuba, but she's a full-time professional umpire there. We had articles about umpires and health, everything you can think about. I talked to a guy that was actually a Secret Service agent when President Bush came after 2000, after 9/11. Baseball was suspended for a couple of weeks, and then President Bush came to Yankee Stadium to open a game there. And of course, there was a lot of concern that he might get assassinated. So somebody, a Secret Service man, dressed up in an umpire's uniform and went out onto the field to be there. He couldn't have stopped a sniper from up above, but if somebody had rushed him or something like that, he was right there, not looking like a Secret Service agent, but looking like an umpire. He borrowed one of the umpire's outfits, and I talked to the umpire. I talked to the Secret Service agent too. Occasionally I would joke with an umpire about whether they carry a gun under their uniform, but this guy did. It's in that book too, but it was really interesting. I learned a whole lot about baseball that I hadn't known before, because I never really paid much attention to umpires. Even today, I mean, I like the game, and even today, if I'm watching and I tell myself, follow the umpires, watch their choreography, make sure that they look, I'm just trying to understand their rotation and why they do things. Somebody hits the ball, I watch the ball, and I forget to watch the umpires moving into position to be ready for the play, because obviously it's a whole different thing whether you've got to run around first and nobody out, or run around third base and 2 outs, or nobody on base. They have different responsibilities for every single situation. I just got really interested in their lives. A couple of times, I think there were maybe 4 chapters in that Saber book where I sat down before a game in the umpire's room at Fenway Park and just had a conversation with them about where they came from, how they get their jobs, what interested them in umpiring to begin with. How do they get from city to city? How do they get paid? How often do they get to see their families? I mean, it's a very lonely profession, where you've got 3 other guys probably on your crew. If you're in the major leagues, it's a 4-man crew anyhow. And you tend to travel with them for most of the year, but they do get 4 weeks vacation. So any given umpire might be away at any given time, and one of the person on the crew is replaced by a call-up umpire, a minor league umpire who hopes to eventually make the grade. But it's a small group. The ball players, there's 25 ball players usually, a little bit more, and maybe in September and so forth, but more or less 25 members on the team. There's a bunch of video guys, the bat boys. There's all kinds of people that are with the team. The umpires have an umpire's room attendant that comes in and makes sure they've got food and stuff available and can run an errand for them, maybe make sure their tickets are available at the gate for any guests they might have, that type of thing. But they're pretty much on their own. They don't travel. They did during the pandemic year of 2020. They traveled with the team. They went on team charters because it seemed to be the best and safest way to travel. Last year they didn't. Last year they were back on commercial aircraft, but they loved it. Instead of having to go buy their own tickets and hope they can make a flight on a Sunday when the game goes into 13 innings or something like that, you never know what's really going to happen. They tend to buy tickets on 3 or 4 different airlines, and then refundable tickets, of course, and then just use the one that they can get to. But it's a pretty lonely profession, and it has its challenges. Ted Barrett is one of the umpires I got to know best from working on that first book in particular, and that we've kept up in touch. I found at one point that he had a doctorate, and it happened to be in theology. So he's actually Reverend Dr. Crew Chief Ted Barrett, is what some of the guys call him. He wrote his dissertation on some of the challenges that umpires face, and whether because he came from a religious background, it was whether faith is helpful to them, some kind of religious faith. I mean, some of them have had alcoholism problems, substance abuse of one kind or another. There's a lot of loneliness involved. That's one of the reasons that they have these 4 weeks of vacation now, because over time, I think Major League Baseball has come to realize that the health of the umpires is very important, physical as well as mental health, and have gone to considerable lengths to supply people that will help them in that regard. So I don't think that they have some of the kind of problems they had before. I mean, you see an umpire get checked if ball hits him off the mask or something behind home plate on a foul ball for concussion protocol, but they get very serious about all that kind of stuff. And it's been pretty impressive to me. I actually did manage to find a way to talk here for 15 minutes. The subject fascinates me. It's been disappointing to me that I haven't really got a chance to sit down and talk with as many of them over the last couple of years. We'll see where the pandemic goes in the future, but I enjoyed going to AAA, and I went down maybe 7 or 8 times and visited crews that were working AAA and hoping to make the majors, and talk to them about their aspirations and where they saw their lives going. And I did take one trip down to umpire school to Florida, to the Wendelstedt School. Spent 3 days down there visiting the school, and I was very impressed with that. I was really impressed with it wasn't just a bunch of guys hanging out and having fun or something like that. I mean, they had real drills that they went through. They had classroom, and one of the things that impressed me in the classroom was they had, at one point, they put up photographs of umpires from, say, the 1940s on a screen in front of the class. And the assignment was to write down the name of the umpire for the students in the class. And thinking to myself, well, what does it matter? And this guy was an umpire in the 1940s. I mean, who really cares? And yet, most of them, they got a variety of different grades. Most of them got more right than wrong. But I asked the teacher afterwards, I said, why would you do something like that? And they just said it's to inculcate a respect for the profession, to recognize that you're part of a lineage. There are these professionals that came before you. You might or might not know who they are, but just to develop that kind of respect. And I think that most of them take it, and I didn't ever meet anybody that didn't seem to do that. I just am suspicious about platitudes. But I think most of them take the profession very seriously, that they really do lose sleep when they mess up. And it's not because they're thinking they're going to lose their job, but they want to do the job. They care about the game as an institution, and they want to do their best to uphold the traditions of the game. But let me ask, Dave, you said you had a couple of questions. Maybe you could kick it off.
Yeah, the information you just gave us was interesting. Why didn't you use your own voice in the book more? Where you could write about all these details that you picked up in your own reporting, rather than the narrative that you got from the umps.
I don't know. I was more interested in, the subtitle of the book is Conversations with Umpires. I'm in there asking questions. I'm in there a lot. Asking questions, and I see my initials. I just flipping through the book right now. My initials are on many pages there.
A lot of that, yeah.
So I don't think there's any shortage of me. Maybe I should have done a little bit better setup in that regard, though.
The one question I wanted to ask was, umpires sometimes are criticized for not giving an immediate call, where they'll pause for quite a bit and then they'll make the out call. Do they explain why they do that?
When you say, how long do you think that might be? 60 seconds, 30 seconds?
Well, the complaints are often from the radio folks who will say the guy slides in there, and then it takes them a while before they see the actual call by the ump. So yeah, 2 or 3 seconds, I would say.
Yeah, okay, not 30 seconds.
No.
Yeah, they will occasionally, you'll see 30 seconds where they'll consult with another umpire, not replay, but there may be a ball that was hit high off the wall, in the outfield, and the umpire from third base, the umpire from second base will say, "How'd you see it?" That type of thing, and they'll try to get the call right that way. No, I don't remember asking that particular question.
Okay.
I think they want to get it right. I don't think they're whispering to the catcher, was he out, or whatever that would be. I think they just maybe pause for a moment to check themselves. That's pure
Anybody else?
speculation, though.
Raise your hand or speak up.
Probably
I
just
had a
speak up.
question on the kind of the lifestyle kind of the minor league umpires. There's been a lot of talk about improving that for minor league baseball players and giving them higher wages, better standard of living. Wondering if there's any been talk of for minor league umpires with that regards.
Well, the umpires at the major league level, they do have their own union. It does not it does not run concurrent with the players' union negotiations. So the umpires are set for this year. They're just waiting to see what's going to happen with the lockout and all. I don't, they have improved some things. They've improved, as I mentioned, in terms of, well, I didn't really mention housing, for instance. It used to be that they had to stay at the least expensive places that they could because it was all on them. There were a couple of times that an umpire got mugged outside a motel room, not because he was an umpire, but just because he was a target. And but they started ensuring that umpires could get interior rooms, not rooms that you walk out the front door and you're in the parking lot, but they have to walk down the hotel corridor and through the lobby to get outside. They do offer more in terms of medical attention at the minor league level too. The pay hasn't really increased that much, I don't think, and I think it's partly a weeding out process. Maybe not a very friendly one, but if you can make it, that says something. Now, at a certain point, you do begin to get these fill-in jobs. If you could probably put in 3 or 4 years anyhow in the minor leagues before you start replacing an umpire that's out for injury or out for family leave or out because it's on vacation, and you get called up to the majors. So I'm talking to minor league umpires. I mean, their cell phone is their best friend because they're just waiting for that phone to ring and hoping they'll get the call. We need you in Cleveland, next weekend, or tomorrow you have to be in Detroit. That type of situation. And they're happy to go because the minute they go, they're paid major league scale, major league per diem as well. The per diem, I think, is, I can't remember, I don't know what it is now, $180 or something like that. To cover hotel and meals and all that. But it's if you stay at the right places, or if you happen to be, Steve Palermo used to live in Kansas City. So when he was assigned in Kansas City, he'd stay with his family and save the money that he would have otherwise spent on the hotel room, of course. A lot of umpires have friends. Maybe once in a while they stay with a friend or something of that sort. For the most part, they stay together and stay in hotels, but and not cheap hotels usually. But it's getting to the major leagues that makes a huge difference. The typical major league umpire works about 120 games during the course of a season with the vacations that I mentioned and all, and just days off. Some of those games may be replay, but they tend to work 120 games plus replay, I should say. You can look them up on Retro Sheet, any umpire. You can look up and see actually what games they worked and follow them that way in a sense. But some of the minor league umpires, the call-up umpires, have worked 150 or more games in the course of a season, almost no nights off. And they're thrilled at that because some of them get paid more than major league umpires, but they don't have the job tenure. They're just getting called up and filling in and filling in and filling in. And they might, at the end of the year, take home more money, but always wondering if they're ever going to get the other call that they want, which tells them that they've been hired at the major league level. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, thank you. Appreciate it.
At all, but you usually see them, they tend to travel in small packs two or three at least together, if not all four. And I can't remember a time that I was at the minor league park and I didn't see all four of them show up in the same rental car because they're trying to save money any way they can. And they're going to eat their meal at the park. I think most major league umpires will have a snack and then go out for dinner later. But I think most of the minor league umpires, the food that they're provided at the park is definitely a meal for them.
Yeah, in Akron, they get a full meal. They have a room down in the basement of the ballpark, and it's usually something in a large styrofoam box, but
Yeah,
it's as good as they put up in the press box, that kind of thing.
probably.
Maybe
Yeah.
sometimes I think it's the same.
The guys the umpire room attendants that work for tips. And I guess maybe they get a little base pay or something, but they tend to work for tips. And I think they do pretty well, but they will try to ensure that the umpires' rooms are very well stocked with food and beverage.
Anybody else with a question?
Was there one, I'm not looking at the chat. I see there's been a few chats. Was there a question that came in the chat?
Largely what the chats were links to your books on.
Oh, okay, thank you.
yeah.
Ryan put in a few I saw, but.
Joe,
Thank you.
did you have a question?
Yeah, Bill, I'm sure like everybody else on the call today, I really enjoyed reading the book and getting a better appreciation for the umpires as human beings, quite frankly. And as you said, I was impressed by their commitment to the game and to do the best job they can. That really came through. And so just an observation and a somewhat related question. One of the thing that really surprised me was, and maybe I should have known this, but I didn't, was the instant replay process and what role the on-field umpires play vis-a-vis the people. I guess I did not expect that they played such a minor role. Here's the answer, go out and communicate the answer. That I found that fascinating, but that leads to my question to you. Did you, in capturing all of this information through your interviews, was there anything that really surprised you? I mean, something that you would have never expected to hear, anything that came out of, pun intended, left field? I would have never thought about something like that. Was there anything that stood out for you as you did all these interviews?
Well, certainly the Secret Service story that I told before, but I mean, that's just a little tiny thing that happened. I think I kind of touched on the surprises that I had being more just the general lifestyle, because I had never thought about. They would appear on the field, and then after the game they disappear, and that's it. And yeah, okay, it used to be fun. You could, boo or something like that if you thought they made a bad call. There's hardly any booing anymore. I talked to Jerry Davis's wife actually before a game one time, and she said that the thing about replay that bothers her the most is that it takes away the big fights they used to have.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
I mean, you'd have people kicking dirt on the home plate or or Weaver taking off his cap and throwing it on the ground or whatever it might be. You just don't have that anymore, because what happens is what you allude to. They one of the managers will signal, replay, and the crew chief and the calling umpire will both walk over to the headset that is right by the dugout, one of the dugouts, and they'll put on the headset, and there'll be umpires in New York, umpires and technicians at the replay operations center in New York, and they'll be the ones that review the play. They might have a question, but if you watch their lips, rarely will they say anything at all. If the umpire that made the call is the crew chief, then it's the second in seniority that would be there. But they have two of them. I don't know why, they just do. And they just listen. That's their job, is to listen and then convey the call. And then in the press box, they might announce that the play was overturned for cause, or it was let stand or whatever. It just, sometimes you don't even know that though.
Were you able to get inside the instant replay room in New York City during your
Yeah, yeah, I have a section in there about it, I think. In fact, I have a picture in there.
I remember the
but,
pictures. I was just I didn't take away that you were actually
Yeah.
able to go in and observe how it really works.
Not how it really works, because I couldn't be there during a game. I can go to a ballpark and sit in the stands during the game, but I can't, I couldn't go into the operations center during a game. I went in, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours before the game, and they gave me a tour. And some of the technicians told me how they did this. And there's all these screens, all room, you can, every single game. I mean, there could be, as we know, 15 games going on simultaneously. And they have to be prepared with enough technicians. There's a dozen or more people that work in the room there. They have to be, they'll watch. And if there's, you know, say there's a commercial break, well, they don't have to pay attention to that. But they, a ball gets hit to left field and there's nobody on base and caught by the left fielder, well, they don't have to focus on that. But if there's a play that at one of the bases or something that looks like it might be, there might be a contract, you know, everybody quickly focuses on that. And then there's that moment that we've all seen that can last a few seconds where the manager in the dugout is asking his support people who are quickly watching it on replay, you know, should I challenge it or not, basically. And that might last, I don't know when they're supposed to make the call, within 10 or 15 seconds, but it can last a reasonable period of time before they say, you know, go ahead, or, you know, do the replay thing. And by that time, you've got people in the replay operations center that are focused on that. They've got a play queued up on multiple. They probably already started to review it just in case. They are told to well, I know they have already started to review it just in case there is a replay. And they've got their multiple camera angles as well, so that they have already started in.
That was fascinating. Thank you.
There's
I would love to
Twitter
be there
account.
while it was actually happening to see.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd also love to hear what they say on the replay, because even though the umpires on the field aren't saying anything, you can sort of imagine maybe one of the umpires in a room is saying, "Oh, Jim, boy, I'm sorry about this. It's not, you know, whatever, you know."
There's
They
a
probably
Twitter
don't say
account,
that,
I think
but-
it's MLB Calls, that announces the confirmed such. I think fans can follow that.
Yeah,
MLB
okay.
it is.
Yeah,
And
there
that-
are, these days, there are more things of that nature. I don't know them all, but to help us appreciate the game from other ways. I don't know if any of you happen to see John Thorne recently. He gives a talk once a year on, well, Zoom recently. And he gave a talk about 10 days ago, maybe to maybe 50 or 100 people or so, I can't remember, that looked in. And we were talking about pace of play. And I think all of us wish the games were faster. And all of us see every good reason why the games should be faster. And I was just talking to, I did an interview with Ed Sprague, actually, a former infielder with the Blue Jays and some other things 2 days ago. And I just said, don't you like the play to be faster? If you're an infielder, you know, it keeps you on your toes more. And he said, absolutely. You know, we don't want to stand around waiting for this and that to happen. But John made an interesting point, which sort of disturbing in some ways, but I mean, I think he believes that instead of 3:20, it would be nice to get the games down to 3 hours. But he says there has been a perceived advantage in baseball compared to other sports, how baseball drags things out a little bit. There's more time in between plays. Football, basketball, hockey, there's a lot of continuous action. But he said it's a big thing for sports betting, that the time, even if it might be 30 seconds between pitches, it gives people a chance to say, you know, I bet the next one's a strike, or whatever they might do. I don't do that, so I don't really know what's involved. But there's a lot of younger people, and I don't think they're doing it for money. It's just a different way that they watch the game than some other people. And maybe it's playful betting, or maybe they just bet on paper, or maybe, and certainly some of them do it for real. We've all seen the incursion of advertising for places like casinos, even in major league ballparks and things of that sort. I don't think it's going to go away. And it was interesting to hear his perspective that the slower pace in some way between plays of games might provide an advantage in that area. I see at least two other people with hands up. Tony, you've had yours up the longest, I think.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for speaking today, and thank you for everything you do to make the Saber experience better. I appreciate both of those. My question's about Angel Hernandez.
Yeah.
We had Cleveland had a game at Kansas City where he made a horrible call that, of course, affected the team that we root for, Cleveland. And Terry Francona publicly acknowledged that he said to Angel, how come every time we have one of these experiences, you're right in the middle of it?
Yeah.
Do you have an opinion on Angel Hernandez? And I understand if you don't want to get him publicly state.
He's a really nice guy. His father he ran the Little League in South Florida. He's got a long baseball history and all. He's the only guy of all the people that I talked to that ever told me that he does this because it's a job. I talked before about platitudes and how people, like to say the right thing and so forth. He was not being at his most politically correct by letting me believe that the main reason he does it is because he makes a lot of money and does it. That makes you wonder. I don't have any reason to think that he cares less, but there's a reason that for platitudes to make you not have that suspicion. And I wouldn't say I'm suspicious that he's careless. I wouldn't say that, but he did let out this thing, and I don't know. He just
he's one of the few umpires that we all know his name, and it's not for a good reason.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's different umpires have. Most umpires, even those of us that try to follow them, really couldn't tell you one from another in terms of their frequency of this or that. But his name has stood out. Joe West's name has stood out for a number of other reasons over time. And I don't know, I was really hoping to write a book about him. I thought he would be a fascinating guy to write a whole book about. He's retired now. I was hoping to do it while he was still active. I started talking to him about it before COVID because I wanted to spend a good period of time during the course of a year, maybe even travel to 2 or 3 different cities with him and watch him in different environments. And I didn't get that opportunity. He liked the idea of doing a book. I think he wanted to wait till he was retired. I think he also thought there was more money in it than there used to be. I mean, 30 or 40 years ago, an umpire that wrote a book might get an advance of, I don't know, $10,000, $20,000, but I don't really think that's likely to happen these days.
Thank you, Bill.
Sure, Dave. I see the
were any of the umpires like disgruntled with replay, saying, the guy stole second base rather easily, but the shortstop kept his tag on, and replay shows that his spike lifted up an 1/8 of an inch off the base, and replay has to call him out because, I mean, granted, that is the rule, but it sounds like, I mean, that's very nitpicky, and I guess in my opinion. And then add on to, eventually we're going to, I don't want to say that's guaranteed, but we're going to have, a computer calling balls and strikes. And obviously that takes away the prime position that an umpire has, because they control the game as the home plate umpire. So is there any
And then you've got Tom Hallion, who's made a thing of his strike call. If you ever have a chance to watch a game and you notice he's working the plate, watch him, because it's been picked up by a lot of other people, but it's showmanship. He gives this really elaborate strike call, and then of course if you strike out, it's even more so. But it's theater, and he loved doing it. by the time I talked to people, replay was pretty much implemented. By the time I got serious talking to people for this more recent book, and the main thing that people talked about was like the Jim Joyce call, if that makes sense to you. But when Galarraga was pitching a perfect game, 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th inning, or I don't know if at the bottom of the top of the 9th inning, but in the 9th inning, and Jim Joyce called the runner safe at first base, depriving him of a perfect game. There was no replay, so the call stood. Argument, but no, the umpire didn't overturn it. And the minute he got back into the umpire's room after the game, within 5 minutes, he told the press, "I made a mistake. I blew it. The guy was out. I robbed that kid of a perfect game." And he still feels, I mean, when I talked to him, it had been years in the past, and he still feels badly about that. How often does a pitcher get to pitch a perfect game? He did pitch one. And yet he got deprived of it because of a call that wasn't overturned. So I think that, I really do believe that the umpires want to get the right call, even if they're overturned. They don't want to get overturned 4 times in a game. But if you get overturned once every 10 games or something like that, which I don't even know what it is, but it can't be that frequent. I think it's become a fact of life and something that, although mildly embarrassing at the time, it's difficult. Some of these plays, like the one you described, I mean, that would be a really difficult play to call from almost any position. The replay umpires get an advantage to 2 or 3 different angles, as we do watching it on TV. But it's I don't think they feel mortified if it's a close call like that. They just, they might not still believe that they got it right, and that, okay, well, replay was wrong. I was right. But I don't know. The robo umps and the automated balls and strikes, I really don't want to see that, but I suppose it's coming. And I think there is much stronger feeling against that than other replay. I think that the regular replay, first it was replay on fair and foul for home runs. There was just essentially home run replay for a few years. And so they kind of got brought into it that way a bit. But now you can have a replay on within limits on most calls. And I think they got used to it rather quickly and at least bought the company line that you want to get the call right. But I really think that most of them believe that they'd rather get the call right instead of some replay. I mean, suppose you made a call, you called somebody out. It was an important play at the plate late in the game, might have made a difference in the game. And there was no replay. And yet television cameras showed that the runner was safe. I mean, that would be worse, wouldn't it? If you were an umpire, to have the play not corrected and to have everybody in the world see that you made a call that wasn't corrected, that would be newsworthy. If you made a call and it gets overturned within a couple minutes, that's not all that noteworthy. It tends to get forgotten more. So kind of a rambling answer.
Well,
good.
even the 4 calls in the San Diego game was only momentarily talked about, right? And then quickly moved on. Bad night.
Right.
It's
Dr.
interesting,
Murphy,
the Atlantic League is doing away with the robo ump and the distance between the mound and the plate. That was, I think, announced yesterday.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
How about, I mean, I guess they don't get pulled on any of the rule changes that happen, like let's have a runner on second base for extra inning games. And I don't know if they're gonna, be up in arms over a rule change or not, because it's really not their job to create the rules. It's just to enforce them.
I kind of wonder if it's a question I should know the answer to, but I never asked, whether increasingly anybody in Major League Baseball consults with umpires just for an opinion. Just, what do you think about this? Like a pitch clock. for instance,
Mhm.
really enforcing the pitch clock, that they would have to talk to them about. There are things that I think that a lot of people believe a pitch clock is coming relatively soon.
Well, and the other thing, you
Yeah.
know, they were asked to basically undress a pitcher once a game to make sure they didn't have anything on their glove or on their body to, you know, and that wasn't part of their job either. I'm sure it went through their union, but you know, that's just a guess on my part.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, it was also, you don't really want to get all that close to people these days if you can avoid it. So I don't know. Ryan, you had a question?
Yeah, it's really strange to me that they say, according to the replay center, 47.7% of umpires' calls get overturned. I guess they're really earning the $5,000 per diem they have to. They get every day. You know, that includes food in the hotels. That's kind of shocking to me that 47.7%.
Wait, say that, well, first of all, there's no $5,000 a day per diem.
Oh.
They get paid, you mean salary, if you would divide up their salary
Yes,
by the number of
Yeah.
days.
Yeah, it's a different thing.
yeah,
Right,
the-
it's
yeah.
the per diem, like I said before, is maybe $180 or $200, but yeah, they do get a fair amount of money. The more senior umpires are getting around $500,000. It's interesting that the most senior umpire, the most highly paid umpire, does not make as much as the minimum wage for a major league ball player.
And I think in the chat I put this, that minor leagues get $66 per diem, according to what I was reading online now. So big
What
diff-
did you say was the percentage of calls that get that get overturned on replay? 40 some percent?
47.7?
Almost half then.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
of course,
But that's
they're all the
select-
calls that didn't get challenged.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if there may be 2 or 3 calls during the course of a game that get challenged, and say there's 2 and one of them gets overturned, that's 1 call a game. And I don't think it quite happens that often, 1 call a game, but that's higher percentage than I would have guessed. But of course, their manager isn't going to waste a challenge on a play that he didn't think had a fair chance of getting overturned.
No. It just tells you that people are challenging the right calls, I guess.
Yeah, and that there's a lot of close plays.
Yes.
One of the things,
Did
if you read
come
the
down to
book,
the minor leagues to
what's that?
look at, did you come down to the minor leagues to talk to some umps?
Yeah, as I said, I several times I talked to them as they were guys that are on their way up, and
No, did you go to Pawtucket? Did you?
yes,
did you go
yeah,
to Pawtucket?
I went to Pawtucket 5 or 6, 7 times to games down there, and met them as they came into the park, and they weren't expecting to meet me. I just waylaid them on the way in, but you know, asked the same kind of questions. Where did you come from? How'd you get involved in this to begin with? And I mean, if you read through the book, I mean, the answers are quite varied. I also asked, you know, what do you think you would have done if you hadn't become an umpire? And those questions are widely varied too. I mean, there's Trip Gibson. He was a high school art teacher, and that's what he was doing in some of the off seasons and so forth. He also plays the banjo on the side. I mean, you know, these guys are real human beings, and they have Tom Hallion. I mentioned he's a stockbroker. Who's the other guy? There's another Ted Barrett. I mentioned is he's a minister. He doesn't do that as a profession. His son is coming along. His son, I think, worked in the minor leagues last year, and I think he got up to AA. So Andrew Barrett, I think he may be coming along fairly soon. Trying to think of who the other guy was. There's another guy that has a PhD. I can't think of him right now, but it's in law, and he's basically, he runs real estate. It's real estate law essentially, but the kind of the different backgrounds they all have are kind of remarkable, and several of them would have gone into law enforcement, which makes sense. The two of them are in law enforcement, working, in the off season as a policeman or something of that sort. Chris Guccione impressed me as I talked about how you sometimes might work 150 games a year as a minor league umpire. He worked over 1,200 games. I think he worked close to or at 1,300 games before he finally got hired. That's 10 years at 130 games a year before he finally got hired as a major league umpire. And now he's been doing it for 10 or 15 years and all. But he just stuck with it. The perseverance that some of these guys have shown has impressed me as well.
Bill, the health aspect also fascinated me. I guess I just never really thought about umpiring being a very tough job, right? You just stand
Yeah.
out there and say you're out or you're safe, but your interviews unveiled some of that dimension of it's not as easy a job as you might, at least I might have thought it was. So I found that quite fascinating also.
Yeah, I mean, I used to do a lot of traveling just because I like doing it, but in no way did I travel twice a week.
Yeah.
I mean, they never work more than 4 days in the same city pre-COVID. I mean, that 1 year in 2020, they did have them work week stretches, but if they work a 3-game or 4-game series, and then they're on to the next city. The team may stay home, or the team, they just do that. The notion is that they don't want the umpires to hang around with the players. Well, the umpires don't want to hang around with the players anyhow. And if you hung around, maybe local gamblers would corrupt you or something. I mean, that's the general idea of why they keep them on the move like that. It's kind of not something that they really had to worry about, I don't think, too much, but it's just the way they've done it. So they'll work 3 games and they're off to the next city. It was interesting during COVID because I did a whole article for Baseball Prospectus on how the relationship between how they handled umpiring during that first year of COVID 2020 season, and interviewed several umpires by phone afterwards. They worked very closely with Major League Baseball. They had a health and wellness committee that they have in the Umpires Union, and they worked with Major League Baseball to work out all the protocols and to agree on, how frequent the testing would be, what the rules would be, and things like the fact that they would travel on charters with the plane. Instead of mixing with the general public, they would go with Major League ball players that would go, say, to Los Angeles to play the Angels or something of that sort, and they would go with them, and they'd sit by themselves. They said that both the players and themselves were a little nervous about it at first, but they never really got to the point about just nodding and maybe a few casual words here and there. But they would tend to keep by themselves, and but they just appreciated the fact that the plane was ready for them. It was a charter, so the plane wasn't going to leave without them. They didn't have to rush to the airport, take a quick shower. They had to keep the same schedule that the players kept, but they had people would have held the plane for them if one of the umpires had just a few minutes delayed or something of that sort. And not one single umpire got COVID. Some of them chose not to work that year. They opted out, but not a single umpire got COVID in that whole season. They were just very careful about the way they did things. They didn't work out in hotel gyms, but they'd go out for walks, that type of thing, and to try to keep in better shape.
Do you see another book or future articles coming from you in this topical area of umpires and the changing game of baseball?
No, I wouldn't mind it, but I don't have the idea for it yet. In fact, I'd love any idea to get me going on something. I would love to write the Joe West story, but I I don't think that's gonna happen. And we got an idea for a book. Let me know. We just put a notice out recently about Native American ball players and hoping to do one of our Saber books where we get 30 or 40 people together, all contributing articles. I really enjoy.
I think you ought to do one on Dan Bellino, because anybody who does real estate law and is a major league umpire is,
Yeah.
is really-
He was the name. I couldn't think of it first there, Dan Bellino. He's got that degree. And he got involved. His mother was a court reporter in the federal court in Chicago. What got him interested in law was seeing all these lawyers come in with their fancy suits on. That impressed him, that these guys just look sharp. And he is this, I think his mother is, I think it's one of those stories where his mother was working with Little League and got him going on umpiring.
Well, I would, maybe not a book, but I would certainly think the impact of IT in, we've talked about instant replays,
Yeah.
the robo calls, the pitch clocks, the whatevers, as those truly start making their way in toto into major league games, that's got to be a fascinating story of how the current umpires and the umpires coming up relate to or reject or whatever the right phraseology might be. So I think there's got to be a story or two there.
I'm sure. It certainly be a good article.
Yeah.
I think there's probably a book there. It's just
Not ready yet.
I don't think it's gonna be me that does it, though. I'm looking for ideas. I'd love to get another full book that really grabbed my attention. I've got one coming out April this year on my favorite player, Ted Williams. I think my 7th book on Ted Williams, maybe my 8th. I should count them so I can know the answer. It's his game-winning home runs. And he hit 521 home runs in the major leagues, and 110 of them won games, which is like 20% of the home runs made the difference. Now, there was a famous home run where he was playing Cleveland, actually, and hit a home run in the first inning in 1946 and clinched a pennant. It was inside the park home run, the only one he ever hit in his career. And the final score of the game was 1-0. So he gets credit for an almost meaningless home run in the first inning, except it was a 1-0 game and it clinched the pennant. But what might have seemed meaningless if a game had ended up 9-5. But there's other home runs that he might hit where the Red Sox take a 6-2 lead in the 4th inning, and the other team scores 3 runs later in the game, but they don't quite make it. He's still, in the way I defined it, gets credit as the game-winning home run. He had to hit the run that made the difference in the end. And Eddie Murray is the only player that's ever had a higher percentage, just about 1% higher, 20.01 to 21.0 or something like that, percentage of game-winning home runs among the 500 home run hitters. But
Bill, one area that has changed probably as much as anything is the media, the reporters covering baseball. In the old days, of course, it used to be 2 or 3 daily newspaper reporters, and that was about it. Now it's much more.
And they would ride on the trains with the players often.
Right, and now a lot of them don't even travel.
Well, especially these last 2 years.
Yeah, so their lives have changed a great deal.
I mean, many of them haven't talked to a player in person for a couple of years now. It's just, it's all Zoom interviews after the game. It used to be you'd go down to the clubhouse and, 20 minutes after the game, the door would open and there'd be 15, 20 reporters who would go into Fenway Park. There'd usually be 15 or 20 reporters that would go into the home clubhouse and try to corner this player or that player, ask a question about the game. And the pitcher or somebody would come and talk to most of the people. And that just doesn't happen anymore. I don't suppose it's going to happen this year either, but
in a clubhouse,
maybe by next
or
year.
never drunk a beer with a ball player. They get most of their information from the handouts.
Yeah. And some of them will develop contacts. Some of the reporters that have been around longer that have email, or the player will actually answer them on Twitter or that type of thing. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely changes in that regard too, and I don't know where it's gonna go from here.
Questions, anybody? Raise your hands. Speak up.
I'm curious how many people are optimistic to think that the season will actually start on time. I have no feeling one way or the other. Looks like more pessimism than it's just they just think the other side's going to blink first, and they went 42 days without talking, right? I mean, just like weird. And yet, I think we all have a sense that the future of the game is far from guaranteed among younger people growing up.
Yeah. Plus, we really don't know much. We don't hear from the players hardly at all, and the
Yeah.
management doesn't say much either. We're really not informed about this process.
About what the issues are this time, you mean? That type of thing?
Yeah, and about how
Yeah.
they're talking, how they're going back and forth. It seems like we knew a lot more in 1994 than we do now.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because you look back on the last few times there's been a collective bargaining agreement. I tended to be more on management side, and I don't know why. My instincts are usually the other way around politically, but in this time around, it seems like the players are. I just think the players have a better position. Some of the things they're asking for to help increase competition in the game and so forth make more sense to me. I think that the current commissioner is not the most PR friendly by any means. He doesn't always convey a love of the game. There's a great article that one of the Boston writers wrote recently about, on that subject.
Well,
Who would make a good commissioner today, do you think?
You.
Me? Oh,
Yeah, who knows? I don't know.
that'd be great.
well, anybody would be better. I'm sorry. Shouldn't say.
Almost anybody could somehow convey better PR sense.
Right.
Somebody that demonstrates the love of the game. That,
Yeah.
Like Giamatti was great at that for his very short period of time. And, I think Selig was fine. Everybody knew that he loved baseball. I don't know.
Bill, I know there's at least one person on here that hasn't been to a national convention before. Why don't you describe what that's like and how it's grown since 2002 when you started going?
How the conventions have grown?
Yes, and what exactly it is, and how much fun it is, and so on and so forth.
Well, it's the same. I mean, if you've gone to a local chapter meeting, it's sort of the same thing, but just on a bigger scale. You get to meet people that, if you say you have a chapter meeting of 20 or 30 people or so, there's people there that know the most obscure things from the 19th century or, whatever it might be. That's just always impressed me. You can just, if you wander around and you just sort of overhear the conversations, it's just astonishing. At the national convention, you've got 600 or 700 people, maybe, if it's usually at least 500 people or so that are all there because they have the love of the game. And many of us focus on very precise aspects of it. Almost every one of us, I'm sure, has a very particular thing, the quirk that you're interested in that is maybe different from others. And just the sort of the minutiae, and it's just you can see how much people care about things. And then, usually have very good speakers, good panels, and a lot of discussion. There's usually a game. We talked about the one with the 4 overcalled replays. There was a no-hitter once at a game in Phoenix. I was not at that one. It was just before my time, I think. But I've seen some decent games. They're kind of just average games in generally speaking. But
Well, let's hope we'll be able to go to Baltimore this August.
Yeah,
Amen.
for sure. After the Baltimore chapter would be their third attempt in a row to host a convention.
Yeah, yeah, they deserve an award
Mm.
for longevity, if nothing else.
We just put out that book. The book was supposed to come out around the time of the convention, but we finally decided to just put it out anyhow.
And the hotel, the Baltimore hotel said, this is the last time.
Yeah, well, I mean, the hotels can, they're struggling in their own ways, but it's gonna be nice if it happens, the hotel, you can walk to the ballpark, and I'm looking forward to it because there's, the game will probably be a Friday night game. It depends, the schedule, if it works out now, there'll be a home game, but there's always a chance that we might have to go to Washington or something of that sort.
Depends on if we have a season.
Yeah. But the Sunday is the last day. The convention, there's usually, I'm on the board, there's always a board meeting Sunday morning. It gets over around 11 o'clock or so. Sunday evening, the Red Sox are playing in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. They're playing at the Little League Park. I can't remember who they're playing even, but it's going to be a major league game that they're playing in Williamsport. So just like I went to London to see them play in 2019, I went to Japan to see them play in 2008 when the Red Sox in Oakland opened the major league season in Tokyo. But I'm figured I live in Boston, and it's about a 6 or 7 hour drive to Baltimore, maybe. So I'll probably drive down, because then I'll have my car available on Sunday, and I'll drive up to Williamsport and watch the game, and then drive home.
Orioles, they're playing the Orioles.
Okay, well, there's a Baltimore connection. So
Yes.
get on the Orioles team bus. No.
Well, what was it like to see the Red Sox in another country?
Pardon?
What was it like to see the Red Sox play in London?
What was it like?
Yeah.
It's just there were Americans that you would run into, of course, because they might be living in Japan, for instance, and wow, they get to see the Red Sox play over there in Oakland, and there were a fair number of Americans at those games. But it's just to see the different. They have a huge tradition of Japanese baseball, of course. Rob Fitz has written a couple of books already, and he's editing a 2-volume set for Saber that'll come out probably in 2023 on travel back and forth between Japan and the United States. England doesn't have that tradition, so it was a whole different thing over there. Japanese fans knew what they were watching. I think there were more Americans in London, partly for whatever reason, than I think there were people that came from Holland or whatever to come over to the game they were living in Europe. But there was a higher percentage of Americans. I think quite a few people actually came over from the United States just for the novelty of it. But there were, definitely people from England that just wanted to check out baseball. It was kind of interesting. I went to talk to the umpires before the game, and as I was waiting for them, I was talking to a security guard, and he said, "Yeah, that's their room over there and all that." So we were just talking, and he said, "So tell me about baseball. I've just been learning a little bit more about it." He says, and we were talking for 10 or 15 minutes, and all of a sudden he said, "Wait a minute, how many games a year do these guys play?" He talked with a British accent, of course, and he may not use the word guys. I'm just making the story up here. But basically he said, how many games do they play? He was impressed by something I was saying about the quantity of games. And I said, take a guess. And he was mainly working soccer games and so forth, or rugby or whatever. But I said, take a guess. And he said, the way you're talking, it sounds like they might play 50 games a year. And I said, well, yeah, 162. And that's not counting 30 or 40 games during spring training beforehand. And that's not counting the postseason afterwards. And he just almost couldn't fathom that. I guess, he was working at a stadium that was maybe once a week or something like that. They'd have a sports event there, maybe twice a week, but different sports. And then they'd have other things that they would do. I don't know. It is a stretch. I don't know how many of you watch every game on television. I mean, probably nobody in the world watches every game, but I I watch almost every game. I'll often be doing something at the same time, even if I'm in the ballpark. I'm often working on a Saber book of some kind or other. I'll be editing some article that somebody wrote, and there's a time you can look up and watch the pitch, and then look down. I'll miss a pitch now and again, or whatever. But I find it hard to just. Well, I have a seat with a desk and a computer, so if I was in the seats, I wouldn't be doing that. But and I do treat myself occasionally by leaving the press box and going and finding a seat where I can watch an inning or two. But I don't, if there's a no hitter going, I'll go out. One time when John Lester just retired, he pitched a no hitter at Fenway. I don't remember when it was, but I decided instead of going out it's more fun being with the crowd. But you always say that expression, no cheering in the press box. I just wondered what it would be like. I had never been in the press box when a no hitter. I'd been to a few no hitters, but I'd never been in the press box. So I thought I would just stay. And would there be sudden murmur? Would there be polite applause? Would there be? There was nothing. It was just dead silence. I think as people were writing their stories and trying to get their questions organized for post game, that type of stuff. It was like totally dead. Was outside, the fans were going wild. They'd seen a home no hitter in front of the home crowd. So I won't ever do that again. Are most of you in the Cleveland area? Ryan, you're from a little further away, right?
Indiana.
Oh, well, that's not that far away. The one of the articles we're going to have in this Native American ballplayers book is going to be on the transition of the team name in Cleveland. Of course, it used to be the Spiders once upon a time, and then the Naps, but for a long time, the Indians. I'm reading right now the book on Louis Sockalexis, which I'd never read before. The first Cleveland Indian, so to speak. A really good book by David Fleitz. But just the Indians changed their name, and the Braves not only didn't change their name, but they're still doing the tomahawk chop. And then, of course, they lost the All-Star game. But during the World Series, it was, kind of weird seeing them do that.
At least they got rid of Chief Nakahoma.
Yeah, well, I love that name, but
Yeah.
But I mean, Manfred was, talking about the Braves during the postseason, said something like, he'd talked to Native Americans and they didn't have any problem. And yet then when you look into it, there is not a single federally recognized Native American tribe in the entire state of Georgia.
He didn't have many people to talk to then, did he?
Well, yeah, I mean, somebody he ran into on the street or somebody he paid to tell him the answer he wanted. I don't know.
I believe the Trail of Tears began in Georgia.
Yes, yeah. I mean, a lot of the Cherokees ended up in Oklahoma.
Well, the Braves originally started in Boston, so how
And the Braves,
Yeah.
the Braves got their name from Tammany. The Boston Braves got their name from Tammany Hall. Before that, there's a long history there. It's fascinating story. I just one of the things I discovered in the last week or so is that Spalding's baseball guide to the rules of baseball. In 1912, there was an edition of it published in the Micmac language. And I'm trying to figure out why.
Is that
you can look it up online and you see it.
Is that an Indian tribe?
Yes, it's an Indian tribe that's from the Northeast, the state of Maine and into Nova Scotia. And why did they, I don't know the answer. And are there any other Native American languages into which the book was translated? I assume it was translated into French and Spanish at some point. This was 1912, this was done. I mean, Sockalexis had come from, he was a Penobscot and he'd come from Maine. But that was 1897 when he first broke in. It's not that much longer. It's still odd. Maybe it was just some guy that had enough money that he paid to have the book translated. There was that a lot of the native, there were all these Indian schools, like the one that Jim Thorpe went to in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And it was they tried to have these residential schools to help to assimilate Native Americans, to push them towards the dominant European culture and so forth. So part of baseball was learning another game that would help integrate them into American society and so forth. So
that's an interesting comment, Bill. There have been some articles recently in the Cleveland Plain Dealer about the assimilation, but it has been taken by at least some of the people interviewed that assimilation meant forget about your native heritage. That's in the past. You're an American now. You got to forget all that stuff from your past.
That's what it was when these schools started. That was their main goal, was to get these kids into a residential environment and not have them follow whatever tribal customs or language. They would only speak English at the schools. If you were caught speaking your native language, you probably get punished. And teach them other games like baseball and then get them out playing baseball with surrounding teams and so forth.
That might be the central issue in Canada right now. They had a lot of those schools, and they're feeling disgraced about them.
Yeah.
But there's so many of them, they're finding these mass graves of kids that were, for one reason or another, dead. Yeah, it's an interesting area. I'm going to be learning a lot while I'm working on this book. And it's I've only found 3 Saber members who are Native American. I'm hoping to find a few more and write some chapters and all.
Well, Bill, I tell people it's going to be about an hour, and you've given us a lot more than that. I want to really thank you for participating today. And I know you're on our list, so I hope you'll come back and help us talk to another author soon.
There was, I can't remember who it was right now, but it was about a month or so ago. I was on, saw somebody else that you had previously, 1 or 2.
Mrs. Morehouse, perhaps?
No.
Epplin.
Oh,
Anyhow.
Yeah, it was Zach Epplin. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, Eplin. Okay.
Yeah, keep them coming. I like the idea of a book club. And one thing about Zoom is it doesn't matter where you are.
I think even after the pandemic, we're going to keep the Zoom, just because people don't have to commit so much of their time on a weekend to get here.
Every number of reasons. There's economic reason, there's reasons of disability, there's reasons of convenience, any number of reasons why Zoom has augmented the Saber experience for a lot of people, I think.
So I will set a new date soon, and a new book. It's been me deciding the book, but everyone's encouraged to nominate a book or suggest it. I'd like to hear from all of you. I think you all have my email. So let me know what you think, and we'll have a new one soon.
We just did our first book group. Ryan, you might have been on that one, I think, about Dick Stewart's book.
Yes.
The book about Dick Stewart.
Dr.
Bill Reisig wrote a book about Dick Stewart. It was a fascinating guy.
Dr. Strangeglove.
Really good book.
Well,
forward to
Dave, Joe Wancho's book is now out on the Jewish Hammer,
I
Al
saw that.
Rosen. Yeah.
Oh yeah. While I've got you guys here, the only issue with Joe's book is that it's kind of expensive. It's I think $35. Is that a prohibitive amount for anybody here? Speak up if you feel that way.
Is that a McFarland book? Is that,
Yeah, yes, it is.
because McFarland usually has ways you can get them for much less. And
How would
in
that
fact,
be?
if you talk to Joe, he might be able to get them for half price or something like that.
Oh, okay. I'll get in touch with him.
I'd definitely like to hear him talk about that book.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll get in touch with Joe.
But $35 for a little slim McFarland book, it's just the way they have to do it. But
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, thank you, guys.
That's great, Bill. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.